Ever get that feeling that American food is kind of, well, different?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Today we're going deep, a deep dive into foods that are totally fine here in the U.S., but, banned in other countries. We're talking Skittles, chicken, even some popular sodas.
Whoa, it's like we're in a parallel universe when it comes to food. That's what makes this deep dive so interesting. We've got articles, research, even stories from people who've seen these banned foods when they're traveling.
Yeah, imagine going to like a supermarket in another country
Yeah.
and your go-to snacks are totally gone.
Hmm.
We'll be looking at the reasons behind the bans, like safety stuff, regulations, and even just different cultures. But it's not just what's banned, it's why it matters.
Exactly. It's not just fun facts. Getting
Mm,
these different food standards really makes you think twice about what you're eating.
Totally. At the end of this, you'll have a whole new view on your plate and how that stacks up to what's okay or even safe in other parts of the world.
Yeah.
All right, let's start with something that might surprise you. Those super bright candies like Skittles and M&Ms, or those neon green maraschino cherries.
Yeah, they've got artificial food dyes that are actually banned in a bunch of countries, especially in the European Union.
I've always thought about those. They're so bright, it's almost weird. What's the science behind why some countries are worried about them?
Well, the EU's got way stricter rules on those dyes. They're worried about health issues. They even have warning labels that we don't have here.
Yeah.
And there's research to back that up. For example, the Childmind Institute did a study and found that while sugar itself doesn't cause ADHD, it can make symptoms worse if a kid's already got it.
That's pretty wild. It suggests that even if these dyes aren't the main cause of some problems, they could be making things worse.
You got it. And that leads to a big idea the EU uses, the precautionary principle. It basically flips who has to prove what. Instead of waiting for proof that something's harmful, they restrict it until someone can prove it's safe.
Which is like the opposite of how we do it here. We tend to let things be until they're proven dangerous. So it's a whole different way of looking at risk.
Yeah, exactly. A good example is yellow 5 dye. It's in tons of stuff. Chicken broth, mac and cheese, some chips even.
Wow, no way. I had no clue it was in that much stuff.
It's banned in some European countries because of potential health stuff, but here it's still totally common. So while yellow 5 might not directly cause ADHD, it does make you wonder about all these additives together, especially for kids. What's this all tell us about the precautionary principle versus the US approach?
It definitely makes you look at those ingredient lists differently. Oh, and talking about ingredients, what about those preservatives, BHA and BHT? I see those everywhere. What's the deal with those and why are some places worried about them?
They're used to make food last longer on the shelves, and you see them in stuff like stovetop stuffing, Ritz crackers, even wheat thins.
I've also seen those in stuff that seems less processed, like butter, meat,
Yeah.
even chewing gum.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy how common they are. That's part of why people are concerned.
Mm.
Some studies have found a link between DHA and BHT and certain cancers in lab animals, though we need more research on how they affect people.
That's a bit scary, especially since they're so widespread. Do we know why they're banned in some countries but not in others? Is the science clear, or is it more about how different countries regulate things?
It's a bit of both. Research on their effects is still going on, and different countries have different tolerances for risk. Some want to avoid any potential harm, while others focus on how these preservatives help the economy.
So it's not just about the science, it's about how different systems interpret and use that science.
Right, and that leads to some pretty wild situations. Get this, U.S. chicken is actually banned in the whole European Union.
Whoa, that's a shocker. I mean, chicken is everywhere. What's the reason for that ban?
It all comes down to how they process it. In the U.S., it's pretty normal to wash chicken with chlorine to fight off foodborne illnesses.
Yeah, I've seen that on packaging.
But in the EU, that's a no-go. Their rules about safe processing are stricter, and they have different ways of dealing with foodborne illnesses.
So it's not that American chicken is bad, but how it's processed worries the EU. It's like they have different philosophies on food safety.
You nailed it. It shows that what's safe in one place might be risky somewhere else. And it's not all about the science. It's about cultural values, how they see risk, and different ways they regulate things.
And talking about different approaches, what about farmed salmon? I know tons of people here love it, but it's not accepted everywhere, right?
You're right. Many European countries actually prefer wild-caught salmon. They're concerned about farmed salmon because of possible contamination and the antibiotics and pesticides they use in fish farms.
So even something that seems healthy like salmon can be part of these international food debates.
Uh-huh.
What are the main differences in how they regulate farmed salmon here versus the EU?
While the EU generally has stricter rules on fish farming, they have limits on how many fish can be in a farm and what chemicals can be used.
So it's not just the final product, it's the whole process of making it.
Exactly. And this brings us to another interesting one, raw milk. It's banned in tons of countries, including Canada and Australia, because of the risk of harmful bacteria like E. coli and Salmonella. This really shows how different rules can be about unpasteurized stuff.
So in many places, pasteurization is a must-have for safety, but not everywhere. It seems like there's always a tug of war between tradition, what people think are benefits, and possible risks.
For sure. And that back and forth is really clear when we look at brominated vegetable oil, or BVO for short.
BVO? What's that?
It's an additive they put in some American sodas, like Mountain Dew, to stop the citrus flavor from separating.
Wait, Mountain Dew, that's a super popular drink. So it's got something that's banned in other places. That's kind of strange. Why would they put a possibly harmful ingredient in a drink they market as healthy, like Gatorade? Is that like a loophole in the rules, or are they being tricky with their advertising?
It definitely makes people argue. BBO's banned in lots of countries because they're worried about health risks, but some American sodas still use it. Some people say the amount they use is safe, but others point to studies that suggest there might be risks.
So again, different countries look at the science and decide on what risks they're okay with differently.
Exactly. And it raises questions about whether companies are being honest and if people have a real choice. Do folks know what's in their food? Do they know about the possible dangers? Can they even find other choices?
It seems like the information we get plays a big role in how we see food and what we choose to eat.
Absolutely. Getting different information can create completely different experiences with food, just like those parallel universes you see in sci-fi. What we see and hear shapes how we think about food and what we think is okay or not okay to eat.
So it's not just about what's allowed or not, it's about the information around those choices that shapes our opinions.
That's a great point, and it's something we'll be digging into even deeper in the next part of our deep dive.
Stay tuned, folks.
And that's where those parallel food realities get really interesting. Just think about it, that someone who gets most of their information from sources that are all about, like convenience and price, might not even think twice about some ingredients that could be bad for them.
It's like they're in a totally different world when it comes to food. They have different priorities and ideas about risk, you know?
Exactly. And on the other side, someone who's reading a lot about potential health risks or like ethical issues with food might make completely different choices, even if it's less convenient or costs more.
So it's almost like we're navigating different food landscapes based on the information we have and who we trust. It's not just what we personally like, it's about how those preferences are shaped by the information we get.
Precisely. And this really highlights how important it is to be smart about the information we get, especially when it comes to food. We got to question what we think we know, look for different perspectives, and think about the bigger picture.
Yeah, instead of just believing what we see on a label or in an ad, we should be asking, who's saying this? Why are they saying it? And what are they not telling me?
Those are great questions to ask. It's all about learning to be picky, not just about taste, but about information too.
And I love that. A picky eater of information. That's my new motto.
And it's important to remember this isn't about making people scared or guilty about their food. It's about raising awareness, helping people make thoughtful choices, and recognizing that there's no one right way for everyone.
It's about finding that balance that works for each person, considering what they like, their values, and the information they have, and knowing that those things can change over time as we learn and grow.
Now, as we wrap up this deep dive into banned foods, we got to remember that things are always changing.
So what we talked about today might not be the whole story tomorrow. New research might come out, regulations could change, and what we understand about these things could shift.
Exactly. What's considered safe or okay in one place might not be in another, and what's banned today could be normal tomorrow. It's an ongoing process.
And that's where our listeners come in. What we've talked about today is just the beginning. It's like an invitation to learn more, to dig deeper into the food choices they make and why they make them.
So what does all this mean for you, listener? It means you have the power to choose your own food reality. You can search for information, question what you're told, and make choices that match your values and priorities.
It's not about being perfect. It's about progress. Even small changes can make a difference.
We hope that this deep dive has given you a new way of looking at the global food landscape and encouraged you to think more critically about what you eat.
Now, as we sign off, we want to leave you with something to think about.
Remember those parallel universes we talked about? Imagine a world where food labels tell you everything. where people have clear, honest information about where their food comes from, how it's made, and how it might affect them.
In this world, food wouldn't be scary or confusing. It would be about knowledge, choice, and a real connection with what nourishes our bodies.
So, listener, what would your ideal food reality look like?
What steps can you take to be more informed and empowered about the food you eat?
Keep exploring, keep asking questions, and make choices that feel right for you.
That's all for our deep dive today.
Until next time, stay curious and bon appetit.
That idea of a totally transparent food system where everyone's empowered, that's pretty amazing.
It's definitely something to aim for, but it kind of makes you wonder, how do we actually get there?
Yeah, I mean, imagining it is easy, but how do we bridge that gap between where we are now and that vision?
That's the tough question, and it's not going to be simple. It needs a multi-pronged approach. It's not just individual choices. It's about consumers, policymakers, and the food industry all working together.
So it's like a system-wide change in how we see and deal with food.
Exactly. Consumers can push for companies to be more open and support businesses that match their values. And they can also push for stricter rules and policies that put food safety and sustainability first.
And policymakers, they have a big job in creating incentives for ethical food production, putting money into research and making sure people have the right info, not just marketing hype.
Absolutely. And let's not forget the food industry itself. Companies need to be more transparent about what they do, prioritize quality over just making money, and really talk to consumers.
It sounds like we need to move past blaming each other and realize that everyone's got a part to play in making a better future for food.
Well said. It's about understanding that our food system is all connected. The choices we make as individuals, the policies we support, and how the food industry operates, it all has an impact.
It's about building a food system that's good for both people and the planet.
That's the perfect way to put it, and I think that's a great place to wrap things up.
I agree. I don't know about you, but after this deep dive, I feel kind of inspired to do something.
Me too. It's been really eye-opening exploring these banned foods and all the complex stuff that shapes our food choices.
We hope you feel the same way, listener. Remember, knowledge is power, and now you know more than ever about this crazy world of food.
Use that knowledge wisely. Make smart choices. Speak up for change, and be part of the movement towards a better future for food.
That's all for our deep dive today.
Until next time, stay curious.